So a couple days ago, I made a video about the Kathleen Kennedy leaving slash retiring slash almost undoubtedly being fired situation. And in the meantime, a couple of things have become clear to me. Number one, it hadn't struck me when it first happened, but that news essentially, I believe it was Thursday night that it dropped, but basically, it came out on a Friday. Now, in the media world, you drop stories on Fridays if you want to put the kibosh on them. So the timing itself, on top of being questionable just in general, as this is sort of a lull in the Star Wars schedule, I guess. It was a disrespectful timing of the week. Number two, I am more and more positive that this is happening now as a warning sign because of The Mandalorian and Grogu. That would strike me as being a move in order to get out ahead of the idea. Look, Disney's very aware of the fact that the entirety of Star Wars fandom, the entirety of Disney shareholders, and I'm more of the latter than the former, do not want Kathleen Kennedy in charge of anything. So, to get rid of her now, to do this when nothing is really going on, beginning of the year, on a Friday, is a sign of, hey, we know this is going to suck. We want to already be on the next news cycle. We want to already be on to fresh beginnings by the time this hits theaters. We don't want this to look like she was fired because of it, but we will have the excuse once this thing comes out that, hey, that was the old guard. We're on to new stuff, baby. And the next thing that I noticed about this, I had no idea that Kathleen Kennedy's retirement would be such an internet holiday. I mean, maybe not like, maybe not the biggest movement on YouTube, but it was all over YouTube. Maybe not the biggest news on Twitter slash X, it was all over X. People that you would not normally have thought would be talking about it were talking about it. And all of the people that you thought would have been right up on it, people who've been talking about it for years, kind of weren't. And I think there was a little bit of a, yeah, we'll believe it when we see it, even after the official announcement. But we did get the official announcement, and we did get an exit interview. And I have to say up front, this exit interview is the most unhinged, the most cold, unhinged interview I think I've ever read. Because of, and when I say cold, unhinged, like she's not coming out throwing bombs, she's not coming out threatening anyone, nothing like that. But some of the things that she says in this, some of the messages that she buries inside of her statements are so self-aware, but still defiant, that you have to believe that she knows exactly what it is she's doing. And it reminds me of something. It reminds me of an internet meme. Here is what it reminds me of. It reminds me of the Goofy meme. You know what I'm talking about. Because every step of the way in this interview, she sounds like she's saying, I will effing do it again. I'll do it again. Look, all the things I did, I don't regret any of it. So, we're going to go through this a little bit and see what's going on. But in an article titled A Shift in the Force for Lucasfilm's Kathleen Kennedy, the exit interview from Deadline by Mark Fleming Jr., we get the following. Deadline says Lucasfilm has percolated a lot of future Star Wars films and generated many hours of Disney Plus series in recent years. I wonder if Deadline can name them. Talk about this combination of Filoni and Brennan and you finally loosening your grip on the reins. In itself, a little bit of a jab, isn't it? All of this failure, you were the one in the chair. To which Kathleen Kennedy replies, 2 years ago, I went to Bob and Alan to figure out what the transition plan would be. Meaning at least 2024, but as this is January, I mean, probably 2023 is when this was starting to come up. Would be, and made the recommendation that it be Dave Filoni and Lynwen Brennan, the latter of whom has been running the business alongside me. She comes out of ILM's 16 years as a general manager, then transitioned into being general manager for Lucasfilm. So the thing that I want to say here, I know that it is on the tip of everyone's tongue that Kathleen Kennedy has appointed another brown-haired female to be the lead of something. I don't see any reason to pass judgment on Lynwen Brennan prior to seeing what she's doing. Outside of that, it appears that she's going to be strictly on the business end of things, so I don't think that there's any reason, even if we do get slop, that it would be her fault. So just to put that out there, just to be fair, whatever. She has been my key financial partner. Now, this might actually be a good thing, because Lucasfilm is still floating, even though they have produced bomb after bomb after bomb after bomb after series that no one watched after series that no one watched, after getting space taken away in aisles around the stores, right? After fumbling the bag on Grogu. I mean, how much stuff... Now, they sold a lot of stuff. And I understand that the first season of The Mandalorian, you wanted that to be a surprise, so you couldn't have it ready for that Christmas, etc. All that. Fumbled the absolute bag on The Mandalorian and Grogu. I mean, why is there not a Mandalorian video game? A shoot-'em-up Mandalorian video game. Why is there not? Why was there not more Grogu merchandise? Even as much as we got. They could have sold all of it, and you know they could have. My business partner running the company. Dave is the perfect person to transition. Well, I think that the perfect person to transition, a lot of Star Wars fans would agree with that in one sense of the phrase. But he hadn't made a movie, and I worked very closely with him, beginning with Rogue One, to get him the feel of how live action works. Still has not made a movie. His background is animation, as he worked with George on Clone Wars. Where's the great Star Wars animation then? Just a question. He's very talented and immersed in Star Wars. He and Pablo Hidalgo. Now, again, I'm not a Star Wars guy. I know some of the stuff, right? I'm sort of a normie when it comes to Star Wars. I know the name Pablo Hidalgo, and I know it for very bad reasons. Are like walking encyclopedias inside the company. They always have the answer when you ask, hey, can I do this with a lightsaber? Why wouldn't you, Kathy? Why wouldn't you? Or, what colors were the sabers? Very simple until just a handful of years ago. Or anything else you need to know with what has come before. Dave has now spent all of the seasons of Mandalorian working with Jon Favreau, who this wasn't a rumor, was it, that Favreau bowed out after midway through season 3, right? Famously with his character dying in the show. Who's been a great mentor to him? And then he went off and did Ahsoka, which was a smashing success, correct? Oh, never mind. Which came from some of the stories he was telling in Clone Wars. He was able to create the season 1 of Ahsoka, and now he's just finished directing some of season 2 and writing all the episodes. He finished that in October. I am confused then as to what the timeline is for his schedule, because wasn't he one of the key parts of The Mandalorian and Grogu? I thought that Favreau had relinquished some type of control on that, and it was mainly Filoni at this point. But if he's midway through season 2 of Ahsoka by October, I don't know what's going on there. But my point is, we've been talking about this for 2 years. We've been talking about it for a lot longer than that. Deadline. Bob Iger retired, was replaced, and then came back. That's not happening here. No, it's not. I told everybody I would stick around a bit longer than I had intended, but I am so ready to go off and have the chance to make lots of movies. Here's one thing I want to give Kathleen credit for. Kathleen Kennedy credit for. One thing, maybe credit's not the right word. What I don't understand is when everything went absolutely haywire with Star Wars, with Lucasfilm, why couldn't they have transitioned Kathleen Kennedy? She was doing the Blood and Bones or Of Blood and Bones. I can't remember the exact title, which never came to fruition. She seems to be absolutely dead set on making things that are female centric. That's fine. It's not Star Wars, I don't think, but that's fine. One of the things so I run a book channel on YouTube called Stripped Cover Lit. And one of the things that I know about literature right now is that YA, young adult literature, is massive. And most of it is female-centric. Why wouldn't they have just made her the head of some books to movies, YA literature pipeline? Why was that not her? She probably would have been very successful with that. She probably would have. But I don't, that's neither here nor there. I don't know why I'm going on to that tangent. I just never understood it. I want to do more movies, and I want the opportunity to get back to a kind of eclectic group of movies the way I used to. I'm looking forward to working with Frank again on some stuff. That's her husband, right? He has been doing a lot of documentaries and having a ball. I'm also really interested in the new technology, I have to say. AI, Deadline asks. Yes, I am interested in exploring using those tools in responsible ways and working out the complications around trying to figure out what we're going to do in terms of protecting artists' rights. I think a lot of what you're going to see is that AI is going to be used as a supplementation of the artists in the movie business, as opposed to replacing them or stealing from them. I think they're going to figure out that part of it. But that is vitally important. But at the same, so she has to virtue signal here. But at the same time, there's nothing more exciting than having new tools that can expand on what you're capable of doing in terms of creating visual language around stories. I've had a unique opportunity to be around a lot of that over the years and witness those changes. So by the way, George Lucas would have been absolutely bananas with this stuff. And that's not a nano banana reference there, but he would have been all over this stuff with the rapid iteration. That would have been something to see. George Lucas of tomorrow is going to be very, very heavily into the AI part of this. I genuinely feel like we're entering that moment again where we're going to see things we've never seen before. I just think that's really exciting. I'm on the same page there, to be honest. Deadline asks, is there some past breakthrough that compares to the potential game-changing storytelling elements AI could help bring forward? It is somewhat comparable to what we did with Jurassic Park, because it was a collision of innovation that George was already doing in terms of sound and pictures and editing and all the area of digital innovation that he really spearheaded. Now, I think, possibly ironically, Jurassic Park, the first one, was predominantly there were animatronics in it. It was not just CG, and it looked way better than the CG stuff that we're seeing today. So it does make you wonder if AI will help bridge the gap somewhere between cheaper animatronics than the massive, very expensive things that we saw in Jurassic Park and the computer-generated stuff, if AI can help bridge the gap so that the computer-generated stuff does look better. And we had an opportunity to do the first CG shot ever in a movie when John Lasseter was at ILM at the time we did Young Sherlock Holmes. There was this stained glass window, and the figure in the stained glass window stepped out onto the church floor. A lot of people don't remember that was, in fact, the first CG shot. I had no idea. It was absolutely thrilling, and what emanated after that was 3 years of discussion and R&D to get to the point where we could create Jurassic Park. I watched that whole evolution and was part of seeing that change in the way we made big special effects movies. I'm not saying that it impacts every single story you're going to tell in cinema. It has, for some reason, but certainly for big tentpole stories where you're trying to world build and create images that people haven't seen before. I really believe this technology is going to do that. Deadline asks, you've just wrapped the 6th film in the Star Wars universe. Is Starfighter meant to be an ongoing theatrical series? It was envisioned as a single film. Sean Levy just made the experience so pleasant for everyone, and we found this 14-year-old kid out of Ireland who had virtually no experience. That's always risky, hanging a story so much on a child actor. You're not exactly sure how comfortable they're going to be. Flynn Gray turned out to be such a special kid. When you cast kids, a lot of it becomes about the parents. He was great, and he has great parents and got lucky there too. Not only was he there with Ryan Gosling, this movie is structured in a way that he had kind of a new actor coming in every few weeks that he was one-on-one with. Matt Smith, Amy Adams, Aaron Pierre, and each one. It was so great to watch him because he would just get so excited by the actors he got to work with. It was like he was in the best university you could possibly be in. Deadline goes on to ask, we are all going to throttle down at some point aside from the potential of AI. What excites you in the moment of exceptional disruption? She says, there is a beauty in being at this stage of my career, where you pretty much know what you're good at and what you really want to do. Oh, that's a rough statement to say when you've probably just almost kind of definitely been fired. And that's an incredibly satisfying feeling. And this is the stuff that I'm talking about. It's not an open secret, right? But I think everyone has come to the conclusion on their own that she was fired. And she keeps making statements like, I know what I'm good at. Well, I mean, is it much? I find it fascinating to have now seen the business from all sides. I have a much deeper understanding for how decisions get made and why. And when things seem irrational or whatever, you understand what's leading to that. But my love is making movies. I just love making things. Who are you trying to convince? Who are you trying to convince? Because it's not us. I think Kathleen Kennedy is trying to talk herself into believing that she loves making movies. What do you love most about it? And this is very telling if you're trying to convince yourself that you love making movies. I love the community. Not, story. Not character development. Not, dialogue is so interesting. I've read so many Ernest Hemingway short stories and I just want to bring that to the screen. None of that. I love the community. Hippy dippy. Yeah, man. Grab some s'mores and let's build a fire. I love the shared experience. I love the collaboration. 3 times now, you've said the same thing. It's just incredibly rewarding. You're in the present all the time. I think when you're an executive, you're not. You feel like you're making things, and then all anybody wants to do is ask about what you're doing next and what's up ahead. Or you're stewing in what didn't work that's behind you, and you're never really in the present. Well, that might be a fairly good explanation of why things never changed with her at the helm of Lucasfilm. What I love about making movies is you're just in it in the moment, and every decision you make in that moment will affect everything. I love the challenge of that, the excitement and urgency of that. It's just kind of thrilling all the time. Deadline then asks, one of your first producing credits came on E.T. That must have been a crazy film to make. It was, but don't forget, Mike, in the context of what we think about today, that was a $10 million movie, which at the time was obviously, with inflation, much more than $10 million today, but still, it was not a massive tentpole budget. It was a little movie. Today, that would be considered very much an independent film. And then it just took off in a time when we used to have celebrations a year into release. Theater owners wanted to have a cake and a big celebration because the movie had run for a year. And those days are, needless to say, long gone. A movie in the theaters for a year. That is the perspective of how long Kathleen Kennedy has been in this business, which raises the question, how did she never learn anything? How was it that after all of this time, everything that we saw with Star Wars, everything that we saw with Indiana Jones, everything that we saw with every property of Lucasfilm, was garbage, refused to change? How was it that you saw a trilogy set up that had no plan? E.T. was the little engine that could. It didn't open huge. It just stayed consistent and steady and just went on to be one of the biggest movies of all time. Raiders of the Lost Ark, Poltergeist, Back to the Future, Jurassic, Schindler's List, Twister, The Sixth Sense, big hits, each with storytelling and technical complexity. You certainly seem like you know what you're doing. Part of me has to wonder if this was a jab. Like, I know that probably this was set up to be a softball cupcake interview, one where, hey, your publicist called us, we want to give you whatever questions you want. When you look at that run of movies, which of those movies is from her time at Lucasfilm, as head of Lucasfilm? Which of those movies did Kathleen Kennedy really have a fingerprint? Like, I don't know, but I know the rumors. I know that, for example, Schindler's List, that was one man's vision, essentially. I know that The Sixth Sense, M. Night Shyamalan, is essentially a one-man show. Kennedy replies, I certainly feel like I know what I'm doing by now. Well, you would effing hope so. But I also just love it. The adage that you'll never work a day in your life if you love what you're doing, I always feel that. And again, this is like looking at the Star Wars fans and doing this, right? Most of the time, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing, mainly because of the people, because there's just something very fun about being involved with a group of people that you admire and like and want to be with, and you're all trying to make the best possible story you can. Something very absent from all of the movies we have seen from Kathleen Kennedy. That's incredibly satisfying. I feel very, very fortunate that I've been able to make a living doing this. It's just like tonight, when Sean Levy was making his eloquent rap speech, reminding me that he flew to London 10 years ago on his own dime to sit down with me and tell me what Star Wars meant to him and how much he wanted to do a Star Wars movie. And in 2022, I called him up and said, let's go. Let's figure out what the movie might be, and here we are. He got to realize his dream, and the process along the way was just a blast. What's better than that? Good movies. Good movies are better than that. This is part of the problem with everything at Lucasfilm. It's not about the making it process. It's not about the people making it. Any artist will tell you that. You can read interview after interview after interview with artists, and they say that it does not feel like them. Like, some people think that this is, I am the artiste, but a lot of the artists that you will respect do not feel as if their work is them. They feel that their work is other people. That's the point of it. That's why we keep seeing these self-inserts from Kathleen Kennedy in these movies. Deadline goes on to ask, so what about the question I asked earlier? She completely ignored it. Sounds like Sean would be a willing returnee, and you've made a discovery with this kid from Ireland. Are we going to watch him grow up in an arc of pictures? We could, but this was designed to be a real standalone. We have Mandalorian movie with Jon Favreau coming next, which also was great and completely different Star Wars movie. That comes out in May. And as soon as I get back into town, I'm sitting down with John and looking at that. So when is she retiring? Because I thought that she was retired. I thought that she was out the door right now. But she's saying when she gets back from Whoop-de-Doop that she's going to be talking to Jon Favreau, which, by the way, very easy to underestimate the legend that Jon Favreau is. You're talking about Elf. You're talking about Iron Man. You're talking about his acting. He was in Rudy. He was in Friends. Whether or not you like those things, those are both legendary properties. So the guy has done everything. She's going to sit down and watch this movie and what, give him notes? I hope not. And so I'll oversee a lot of the effects shots cut into John's movie. And I'll get myself re-immersed and get that finished. With Sean's movie, this could go on, but it's not our intention right now. We really made this movie as a standalone story, but you cannot ignore the fact that this young actor is so good. I will be very surprised if he doesn't go on and we don't try to see if there might be future stories. But it was kind of nice to get going into this and not having to think that way. We could just make a movie and tell a story. Deadline then follows that up. What have been the highs and lows or running a company built on such beloved IP? Now, this is where you should get some reflection. This is where you should get some about face. This is where you should get some acknowledgement. But this is what we get. The highs include realizing how many people love Star Wars. The majority of people, and certainly the people that I ran into, and people outside the business, they love Star Wars. They love the movies. They might love all the shows. They might love some of the shows. But when I came into this, I realized a few things. We had walked in at a moment when there hadn't been any movies for 10 years or more. But there was still the memory of the greatest series of movies in cinema history. So you're walking into something that has enormous expectations, yet at the same time you know that you've got to find new characters and you have to expand the galaxy. And you need to think about who the audience is. Audience is present tense. Kathleen Kennedy clearly and definitively ignored the audience that was. That's what I feel that I did, and that's what I feel all the people I've worked with over the last decade did. The highs include bringing in a new audience. She tried. Who is that new audience? Where are they? What do they do? What do they spend their money on? It's not Star Wars. As a Disney investor, I can promise you that. I think we did find new characters. Well, we continue to find new characters. New characters? You can walk down the street and find a new character. That doesn't mean anyone wants to watch them. You can write any type of story you want, and bada bing, bada boom, there's a new character. Is that character likable or even interesting? So, for example, Darth Vader, not likable, very interesting, very hard to look away from. Hannibal Lecter, not likable, very interesting, very hard to look away from. I was thinking about this the other day, the only characters that from the Star Wars post-Disney, think about Star Wars characters for whom you would watch an 8-part series. There's quite a few of them in The Mandalorian. Gina Carano's character, the Mandalorian himself, Grogu, the Carl Weathers character, lots of them in Mandalorian. Those are the only characters that I can think of. I mean, Kylo Ren was a little bit interesting, but kind of not really. Certainly not likable. Would you watch an 8-part Kylo Ren series? Probably not. The only characters from this entire time that Disney has owned the property about whom I would watch anything came from The Mandalorian. The lows, she ignored it. The lows are that you've got a very, very small percentage of the fan base. Well, you've got a very, very small percentage of fan base now that has enormous expectations and basically want to continue to see pretty much the same thing. Wait. Didn't you talk about wanting the audience that the series had? And nobody wants to see the same thing. They might want some of the same characters. Of course they do. Why wouldn't they? And in a very unique cinematic experience, you had those actors at the correct age they would have been had the story just continued. You don't get that all the time. And they were all in the series. And it was garbage. There's no... The baton was not handed off. Those characters just died in scenes that no one cared about. Did anyone care about Kylo Ren killing Han Solo? You hated seeing Han Solo die. I mean, I guess it. As a guy who's not a Star Wars guy, that scene held no emotional weight for me. Luke Skywalker evaporated on a rock. Princess Leia froze like Jack in Titanic, but space. Where did they hand off the baton? So a lot of storytelling really can, I think, especially in movies, not to poo-poo movies, but I think that this is true, it's a visual medium, be related to professional wrestling. There's an old adage in professional wrestling, when you go out on your back. When you retire, someone pins you, and guess what? That guy gets all of your attention. All the attention that you had goes to the guy who pinned you. Now they have to do something with it. And it's the same thing as, not a wrestling guy either, but one of the things that I know about big wrestling huffaws the past few years, The Undertaker had an undefeated streak at WrestleMania and lost it to Brock Lesnar. Why? Why lose it to Brock Lesnar? Brock Lesnar was the biggest heel in the sport, from what I understand. Or one of them, for sure. Brock Lesnar does not need to beat The Undertaker and end that streak. You did nothing with that from a storytelling fashion. It's the same thing with these characters from Star Wars. I'm not sure there's anything you can do about that, about the people who wanted good stuff, because you can't please everybody. Did you please anybody? Genuine question. Honest question. All you can do is try to tell good stories. Well, you could tell good stories. You have entire teams behind these movies. You could not stop until there is a good story. And try to stick to the essence of what George created. Now, again, as an outsider to this world, I don't think that was there. He embedded incredible values into Star Wars and what it had and what it has to say. Star Wars, again, as an outsider, the professional wrestling viewpoint of Star Wars, light side, dark side. good guys, bad guys. Now, I'm not saying there's not a whole lot of interesting story in between, but where were the witches? We've got them now. Where was all of this? So the moral ambiguity of Star Wars that we got from Disney, like the only that I can think of from that trilogy, real moral stance. Well, rich people are gamblers and bad. Okay, far out. And future iterations of Star Wars would be brought to you by FanDuels. He embedded incredible values into Star Wars and what it has to say. The whole idea of hope and fun and entertainment is in what he's done over all these years. That's what I tried to preserve. So hope surely is in there, but I don't know that that's the value. I think that's a trait, not to nitpick. The whole idea of hope and fun is entertainment over all these years. That's what I tried to preserve, and I wouldn't do it any differently. I wouldn't do that any differently. I wouldn't change anything that we've done over the years. You see now why I think that this is the Goofy meme. I'll do it again. I understand why some people may like certain things more than others, but that's not going to change why I decided to do certain things and why I decided to work with the people that we worked with. She is completely cognizant of what the criticisms are. She knows why people hate all this stuff. And she's telling you to your face, shove it. Shove it. No reflection. No, I screwed that one up. No. No. Part of me wonders if this is why this is the time. Why this is the now for Kathleen Kennedy's retirement. I think everybody that came into the Star Wars space, they love Star Wars, and that was the first and foremost important. You want to have people coming into Star Wars wanting to tell stories and wanting to make movies and wanting to create television shows that you respect and care about. Jon Favreau is completely different than Tony Gilroy, and yet they're both incredibly talented storytellers. I found it thrilling to support each one of them in trying to tell the stories they wanted to tell. Those are the ones you picked? Those are the ones you chose to talk about right now. You're not talking about J.J. Abrams. You're not talking about Rian Johnson. The ones you chose, you're not talking about Leslie Headland. In this moment, you chose Jon Favreau and Tony Gilroy. That's what I think I do well. Again, you went with Favreau. Tell Favreau to make a movie about pizza delivery men in Alaska. It's going to be good. It's going to be interesting. There's going to be likable characters. Rian Johnson, maybe not so much. That's what I think I do well, and that's what I like to do and want to continue to do. And hopefully that took Star Wars into the next step. One of the things that is interesting, I think, about this interview is how much of it is talking about what's next. How much of it is, hey, there's this, look, hey, right? Not reflection, not a celebration. Hey, I'm not dead. That's what we keep getting through this interview. I'm not dead. There's going to be stuff coming. We'll see in the long run. But it feels like I did. To who? I feel like we expanded the universe. We brought new audiences in. Where's the audience? There is no audience. And I think it's the most difficult thing to do with franchises in general, but especially with something like Star Wars, where George just created something that became part of everybody's childhood. Oh, that's all? Just? That's all? Every single filmmaker that walks in and wants to work on Star Wars, the first thing they say to me, the first thing I hear is, let me tell you about when I went to see Star Wars for the very first time with my dad. That's what Kathleen Kennedy is trying to change. With my dad. Had to get that in there, didn't she? Deadline. Back when J.J. Abrams started the third cycle of Star Wars films, I asked a lot of filmmakers how that very first film affected them. My favorite reaction came from Ridley Scott when I interviewed him for the film The Martian. He looked at me hard and goes, well, this is what happened. And then he told me this great story about being with David Putnam, and they were working on Tristan and Isolde, and as his next film, and he took a break to go see this movie everyone was talking about. Ridley said he found himself getting more and more pissed while he was watching it. Not because he didn't like George or his movie, but because he didn't think of it first. As he exited the theater with Putnam, he turned to the producer and said, I think I'm not going to be able to do this movie with you. I've got to go to space. That led him to Alien. You always hear how Bruce Springsteen or other musicians watched Elvis Presley or the Beatles in those early days of television and knew what they wanted to do with their lives. George did a version of that with his first trilogy. How did it change you? How did George's trilogy change you, Kathleen Kennedy? This is what we get. I didn't realize that about Ridley. That's fantastic. So many of us can talk about the moment they first saw Star Wars. It changed so many people in the movie business and the way you thought about what you wanted to do because of what we were just talking about. The new tools and innovation and how we tell stories and how you create imagery. He created a world in a way that 10 years before you couldn't have done, and everybody was blown away by seeing something they had never seen before. That's her answer to how Star Wars changed her. It's always great when a movie makes us feel that way. I felt it on Oppenheimer, and more recently on One Battle After Another, and especially Sinners. The audacity of Ryan Coogler to veer from that sultry blues number in That Club to imagery of people past and present from Africa to Compton, where you could see the connective tissue and historical influence past and present to that form of music. Coogler went into the genre sandbox and turned it completely on its ear and made it relevant to everybody as they thought about their own tribal roots and origins. I don't think I'd ever seen a movie quite like he did it. I imagine you'd give your eye teeth to have a guy like that see where he could make a mark in the Star Wars universe. Oh, trust me, Mike, this is a big part of what I've tried to do. Sit with people that I would love to see them step into this space and create something that we've never seen before. But Star Wars isn't really Ryan's thing. The trickiest thing is to find a filmmaker and say, you can step into this space and you can still be you. You just talked about Ridley Scott. There's an interview on YouTube you can find with George Lucas and, I'm blanking on his name, the premier filmmaker of today, Batman Begins series. Why am I blanking on his name? Anyway, he did an interview with George Lucas, Inception guy, Christopher Nolan. He did an interview with George Lucas where he praised George Lucas and said that he changed films. Everyone in Hollywood would do this. And your answer was Rian Johnson and Leslie Headland. You shit the bed. Plain and simple, straight up, flat out, pillar to post. Tony Gilroy, I knew him well from the Bourne Identity movies. He didn't see himself making a Star Wars movie. I said, okay, let's just talk this through. And he came in on Rogue One and helped us. And then he slowly started to get hooked. By the time we were talking about Andor, he found a way in because he realized there was something important he had to say and could do inside Star Wars. And that started to become very exciting for him. So this here. He found a way in because he realized there was something important he had to say. I'm a literature guy. You see these things behind me. There's a possibly apocryphal story about Robert Frost, maybe the preeminent voice in American poetry. Certainly the only poet that I believe you could find 90% of people who know a line of poetry from him in America, right? The only American poet, maybe. There were two guys who wanted to be his apprentice, right? They wanted to write poetry. They wanted to learn poetry from Robert Frost. He was only going to take one. So he asked them, why do you want to write poetry? The first guy said, I like to have fun with words. The second guy said, I have important things and I need to say them. Robert Frost picked the first guy, the guy who wanted to have fun with words. Maybe it's a fake story, but I think that it does get at something. When you are making art and thinking you have something important to say, probably you're going to screw it up. So this is the difference between, in my definition, art and propaganda, because they look very similar on the surface. Art is open to interpretation by the reader, the viewer, the listener. That's art. To that person, that poem, that short story, that movie, that song means something. Propaganda says, I have a message, and this is what needs to be understood by you, the consumer. And he realized he could do it inside Star Wars, and that started to become very exciting for him. It's thrilling to find that. I've had only early conversations with David Fincher, with Vince Gilligan for TV. I have sat down with Alex Garland and others where the minute you say their name, you go, oh, that might be an interesting Star Wars. So, I mean, okay, if that's the way you want to... Where is she retiring? Why is she still having conversations with people? But not everybody is going to just go, oh, yeah, great, I'm going to drop everything and spend the next 3 to 5 years trying to figure this out. That's the other thing to consider. These are really complicated, difficult movies to make. Do they have to be? Is The Mandalorian all that complicated? Far more than I think people give them credit for. People have to set their lives aside for years. How many years on average? 3 to 5? Who cares about this answer? Let's get to what the fans are eager to know. The progress on films and series by filmmakers who've committed to putting that in that 3 to 5 years. Rian Johnson, James Mangold, Simon Kinberg, Taika Waititi. Where are all their projects at? Don't end a sentence in a prepositional phrase. First, Kennedy replies, I've got to tread a bit carefully here. Jim Mangold and Beau Willimon wrote an incredible script, but it's definitely breaking the mold and it's on hold. Sounds to me like it's canceled. Sounds to me like the hires up at Disney said, oh yeah, no, we're just going to put it on hold for now. We don't know. Taika has turned in a script that I think is hilarious and great. It's just not my decision. It's not just my decision, especially when I've got a foot out the door. Sounds to me like this one they said, hey, that's not Star Wars. This is Disney. We're telling you that's not Star Wars. Donald Glover has turned in a script. And as you've read, Steve Soderbergh and Adam Driver turned in a script written about... So here's the interesting thing here. Donald Glover turned in the script. Are you just soliciting scripts from actors? It's a weird place to be if you're Lucasfilm, in charge of the most recognizable IP in the world, perhaps. And as you've read, Steve Soderbergh and Adam Driver turned in a script written by Scott Burns. It was great. Anything's a possibility if someone's willing to take a risk. This is maybe the most telling out of this list. The rumor is that they were told no. That Disney told them no. And Kathleen Kennedy said, well, yeah. And Disney said no. So Kathleen Kennedy tried to go grassroots and ended up going AstroTurf, trying to get publicity for this project. The whole Save Ben Solo movement or whatever, absolutely astroturfed. And of all of these projects, she lists Steve Soderbergh and Adam Driver, turned in a script written by Scott Burns. It was great. That's more than she said about any of these other projects. And then went on to add anything's a possibility if somebody's willing to take a risk. So she is putting the ball back in Disney's court, saying, you weren't willing. I remember when I came into this job, the first thing Bob Iger said to me was, be bold. So now she's blaming it on Bob Iger. She has taken it and said, you got to take a risk on this one. I remember Bob Iger told me you've got to be bold. Don't you? Don't you, Bobby? I've always liked that because I think it's what you have to do is be bold. You have to be willing to take risks with people and ideas. Otherwise, you were just doing the same thing. Right now, we're in an era where companies are so risk averse. Disney's being so risk averse, and I get it. I hear all the conversations. They've got Wall Street to please, not the fans. I, Kathleen Kennedy, am trying to please the fans, not Wall Street. I am high-minded, and I get it. But I also believe that that's what contributes to things disappearing, ultimately. I just think you have to take those chances. She is ranting right now. We're 3 paragraphs into this answer. Everything I just reeled off to you is taking a bit of a chance because none of those filmmakers are just walking in trying to do the same old, same old. That's what she tells continuing the story of Star Wars. That's what she calls continuing the story of Star Wars. I'm excited by that, but the studio's nervous about that because the studio is in shambles. And by the way, the studio? Aren't you the studio? Are you referring to Disney, the company? And that's kind of where it sits at the moment. Deadline asks, what about Rian Johnson's returning? After Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi grossed $1.3 billion globally, we expected him to return. Once he made the Netflix deal and went off doing the Knives Out films, that has occupied a huge amount of his time. That's the other thing that happened here. After Sean, I started thinking about Star Wars. Stranger Things kicks in, and he was completely consumed for a while by that. That's what happened with Ryan. And then I do believe he got spooked by the online negativity. I think Ryan made one of the best Star Wars movies. He's a brilliant filmmaker, and he got spooked. This is the rough part. When people come into this space, I have every filmmaker and actor say to me, what's going to happen? They're a little scared. Is Jon Favreau scared? No, he made a really good Star Wars property. It is not that they're coming into the space, is that they do not have confidence in what you're doing. You've developed a thicker skin, no doubt. Maybe too thick. You can't have been used to all this criticism when you were producing all these movies with Frank Marshall or Steven Spielberg. What do you say to ease the apprehensions of these newcomers to Star Wars universe? Every time you release another movie or series, it's like fire in the hole. I'm honest, especially with the women that come into this space. You were just talking about how Rian Johnson has been raked over the coals. Raked over the coals for the movie that he made. Rian Johnson, he says he's not spooked. He's probably having nightmares about the Star Wars fan base weekly. And your immediate turn is that I'm very honest with the women. They're going to be unfairly targeted. No. There were several female directors on the Mandalorian franchise. All of the conversation around their episodes that I remember was very, very positive. I don't try to sugarcoat it, and I emphasize that it's a very small group of people with loud megaphones. I truly do believe that it's not the majority of the fans. A little bit of Marxism here, trying to turn the naysayers against themselves. And I think we're also in this weird world where the bots can affect. Now they're bots. Now it's not even real people. Absolute delusion here. You have to develop a tough skin. That's exactly right. That's what you have to do. You can't make it go away. You can make it go away. You do good stuff. You do good stuff. That makes it go away. All we can do is put our heads down and go to work, believing that believe that we're doing the best we can, telling the best story we can. And if somebody gets really nervous about it and doesn't want to do it, I say, then don't do it, because I can't tell you that this won't happen. How does the project with Simon Kinberg is writing and producing? He's working right now. He wrote something we read in August, and it's very good. I don't really care. Are there any Star Wars films or spin-offs that the fan base will never forgive me for overlooking? We've talked about this new trilogy, and then the things that you mentioned. Mangold's is really on the back burner, as is Soderbergh's. I think the ones by Taika and Donald are still somewhat alive. That's going to really be up to the new team to figure out. Dave, I know that Dave and Lin-Win are very much on board with what Simon's doing, and that would be a new trilogy. In the timeline of things, that takes you well into 2030 plus. So that's what's really up next. Whatever they do next, you are looking at the 2030s. Do you want to be looking, if you're Disney, at 20 years of failure? Do you want to be looking at 20 years of failure if you're Disney? You have to get this right. You have to. Which of these will you produce? I am open to producing any of what they need. Certainly in the things that I've been involved in and the filmmakers that I've been working with, I'd love to see those through if I could, but I'm not mandating any of that. You're not in a position to mandate anything, period. I'm genuinely trying to support the new team that's coming in and encouraging them to make the decisions. It seems much better than many situations where leaders step away after a long run and those remaining turn into a Game of Thrones thing. It was not a Game of Thrones guy. I know what that's being referenced to. Now, clearly, your marriage has endured as you and Frank Marshall pursued your passions. You'll do more together and be in each other's faces a lot more. Any concerns? I don't care about our concerns. I just wanted in there that was put in there. The Game of Thrones jab was put into this. Anyway, that's kind of the gist of this. Completely unapologetic, completely delusional, very in your face, very I'll do it again. The entire thing is absolutely cold, unhinged. And I don't know where anything is after. I am more confused after reading Kathleen Kennedy's exit interview than I was after immediately following the announcement. The announcement raised questions. You had to wonder why things were taking place when they were. But I think you could figure your way through them, even if you were just drawing conclusions. Now, Kathleen Kennedy speaking so much about the future, I don't know where things are. I am much less enthused about Kathleen Kennedy's departure than I was prior to this interview. But maybe that was her grand strategy. Because she seemed to always be of the idea, well, I'm never leaving, baby. You can't push me out, right? So the entire thing is wild. But one thing that I want to reiterate that I had talked about before in the last video I did about this situation, Kathleen Kennedy put Dave Filoni in charge. Okay, great, whatever. Bob Iger is retiring soon as well. Okay, great, whatever. The new guy, or girl, leading Disney, the new CEO, the promising thing about that Kathleen Kennedy is going first, the promising thing about that is that Dave Filoni won't be the new guy's guy. Dave Filoni will not have the automatic go-ahead from the new CEO. The new CEO is going to make sure Dave Filoni is on track, is making money, is telling good stories. The new CEO does not owe anything to Dave Filoni, and the new CEO is probably going to have a Rolodex of people who would want this job. So if Dave Filoni does not perform, does not execute, guess what, buddy? It is a matter of moments. That is all I have for this video. If you like or appreciate this sort of thing, hitting a like button really does help me out. And if you hit the subscribe button, I would love to have you back for the next one.